Lisa mentioned the LRP program that started with the Sheriff's Department back in 2009. Prior to that program going into effect, really the way inmates got into programming was by a request. There was no comprehensive look at the individual. And we've learned a lot since then about, this population is a group of individuals that have individual needs. So this mandatory supervision process has been very beneficial for these folks. It is a true paradigm shift. There's no question about it. I'm not a practitioner by any stretch of the imagination. Our reentry manager sitting out in the audience, and I'll point her out later at the break if you have any questions for her. But even from the sworn perspective and looking at how do we address the needs of these offenders, convincing the sworn staff working the jails that they play a part in that has been challenging, and it's going to continue to be challenging. I wasn't sure how that was going to come up, if it was animated or not. So what you see on the screen is our mandatory supervision inmate process. This is a process, what you see up here is not for all MSO, not all of the MSO population. It really depends on their length of stay and their security level. Two of our facilities, our women's facility and the facility that I manage, I have low-level inmates, so they get most of these things if their length of stay is appropriate. But they will get an orientation when they come into our custody at the low-level jail and at the women's facility. And part of that orientation is a discussion with the counseling staff as to what they can expect as on the status of being an MSO. They also fill out some documentation that the counseling staff then uses later to develop their reentry plan. They are assigned to a case managing correctional counselor, and that person will work with them closely throughout their custody stay unless they're transferred to another jail, and then there's some collaboration that happens between facilities. If they are eligible, they can be assigned to a job at our facility. So the facility that I run, about half of our camp are inmate workers, and that's about 240 or so inmate workers. So there's a really good chance for them to get some employment in custody while they're going through these programming. A intake assessment and the COMPASS and the PSI information will be received by the correctional counselor in custody from the probation department. And again, that helps to build the case plan. MDT with the inmate, the correctional counselor, the alcohol and drug specialist, and the probation officer can occur in the jail depending on what the needs of the inmate are. The MDT definitely occurs when developing the case plan, but it's also helpful if there's some resistance on the inmate's part. They can bring the inmate in and have this group conversation with this individual about why this benefits them to participate in these things in custody. The written community reentry plan, when I got some copies of that the other day, it's pretty impressive. It's basically a breakdown of what this individual needs and what they've accomplished while they've been in custody. And that ends up going to the court when they go to court for the MSO court, and also for the supervision plan, it goes to the supervising PO. They will attend the mandatory supervision court 30 days prior to release. And that gives us some additional time if they maybe have not completed some of the things that were expected of them to work. The correctional counselors in custody can work with them for that last 30 days. And then they'll complete a reentry class, which really goes over life skills prior to them getting out, how to fill out a job application, how to do a resume, things like that. So that's very helpful. So only some of these MSO population get all of these services because, again, it's based on length of stay, and it's based partly on their custody level, but all MSOs in our custody, regardless of custody level or length of stay, will get some of these services. They all end up going to court. So some of the things that are offered in custody are psychosocial group type classes, cognitive behavioral therapy, vocational classes, and substance abuse treatment. One of the things that I found that helped us out, especially at the facility I'm at, is to get some of the buy-in with the sworn staff, because it's critically important. They can make or break this thing by transferring inmates in and out of the jail where most of this programming occurs. Is I implemented a program where I hired a couple deputies that I call programs deputies, and they interface with the correctional counselors, and they're very involved in what's going on with the programming. And that's been very helpful in getting guys to, I don't want to use the word coerce, right? They just get them to understand the need to go to classes. We've struggled with that in the past. It's always been voluntary. These classes have always been voluntary, so this has been helpful. Some of the programming that's offered in the jail, there's two kind of categories. One is the core classes, and this is what most mandatory supervision offenders can expect when they go into custody. We talked about the orientation, a probation 101 class, thinking for a change, and that's really dependent on their length of stay, on if they're going to participate in thinking for a change in custody. It's a very structured curriculum. Substance abuse training or classes, relapse prevention, GED, and then that final reentry class. We also offer supplemental classes, and you can see the list up there: anger management, life skills, HIV class, serve safe, food handlers, some of the vocational type programs, anti-theft, computer graphics, and parenting. There we go, the animation. That's okay. So prior to an inmate's release, an MSO's release from our custody, they go through this process. And 60 days prior to release, they get that reentry class that we talked about. It's very important for them to go through those things and either recall the skills that maybe they once had, or to gain the skills if they never had them in that class. The case plan is updated using that MDT model we talked about. Again, that collaborative effort in looking at the specific needs of the individual is critically important to the success of this thing. The review of the progress in custody at court, that happens with one of our correctional counselors. They go to court and talk about what the individual has done in custody. And also the goals by the offender. The offender actually writes out their goals for what they want to accomplish out of custody, and that helps because we can hold them accountable to their own words, and that's very, very helpful. And I will turn this over now to Kim Vegas.